Okay, folks, we're back with video number 2. Mr. O here. We're going to talk now about developments in Dar el-Islam from 1200 to 1450. And Dar el-Islam is basically all the areas that Islam had spread to during this time period. That is generally what we mean by that term, Dar el-Islam. And as you can see, all the areas with any bit of green were heavily influenced by Islam, and really moves into India towards the end of that time period. Okay, so challenges to the Abbasid Caliphate. That's where this really starts with. And the Abbasid Caliphate is the last of the Islamic caliphates, or I'm sorry, the Arabic caliphates, based in Baghdad, which is right up here in Iraq. Conquered in 1265 by, wait for it, the Mongols. Dun, 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 dun. I don't have the montage for you, sorry, but we'll just kind of envision that. All right, so the first group to really challenge the Abbasids are the Egyptian Mamluks. They conquered area of Egypt and what is the modern Middle East. As you can see on the map below, all that area in the kind of the bluish color is what becomes the Mamluk Empire. They actually defeat the Mongols after the Mongols defeat the Abbasids. And in that battle, that really symbolizes the largest extent of the Mongol conquest or penetration into Southwest Asia. The Mongols do move elsewhere. They will go on to conquer China and parts of Eastern Europe and pretty much all of what is modern-day Russia. Okay, so those are the Mamluks. Seljuk Turks, they press into the Abbasid Empire really beginning around 1000 CE. They are Turkish-speaking pastoralists or herders from Central Asia, and they're the first of several groups of Turks who move into that area. Originally, they served as soldiers, slave soldiers in the Caliphate army, but they increasingly take military and political power and eventually will claim the title of Sultan. In the process, there's a mass conversion to Islam, leads to a major expansion of the Islamic faith beyond the Arabic people. And the Turks become, for the next really almost 1,000 years, the defenders of the faith, really up until the early 20th century. Okay, the Crusaders, this is a response to the Seljuk Turks' conquest of the area, what are called the Holy Lands of the Middle East, those areas that you see on the map behind you here in pink and red and yellow. These are the important early Christian sites, including the city of Jerusalem and the other areas that encompass the life of Jesus. The Crusaders were European Christian warriors. They attempted to reconquer these holy lands for Christianity at the response of, or the urging of the Pope and the Catholic Church in Europe. And it's really in response to a persecution by the Seljuks of Christian pilgrims who were traveling to this area and being abused by the Seljuk Turks, whether it was financially or physically. Initially, they're successful, and for about 100 years, they rule parts of this territory. At their height, you can see around 1229 they've conquered a whole lot of territory, but gradually that will back off over time. Okay, and that brings us to the Mongols. Okay, they invade into the Middle East as part of their invasion of everywhere else in Eurasia. In around the mid-13th century, around the mid-1200s, they sacked Baghdad in 1265. And this really spurs the collapse of the Abbasid Caliphate, the last of the Arabic caliphates, and you'll start seeing the fragmentation of the Middle East until eventually the Ottoman Turks move in the 14th century and 15th century to conquer those former areas. Okay. The other big factor pressing on the Abbasids is economic competition. And a lot of that is simply because you have a lot of improvement in commercial practices that lead to an expansion of trade. And to some extent, it's a result of the Mongols, because the old land routes of the Silk Road are probably the safest way to travel at this time, because the Mongols protect that trade. So the ocean-going routes maybe fall out of favor, which those favored the the roads through Arabia. Everything came through Constantinople, which at this point in time is not part of the Abbasid Caliphate. It is still controlled by the Byzantine Empire. So the competition with other empires, the Mongols and the Byzantines, and also the Europeans and a few others, lead to some of the economic downfall of the Abbasids. Okay, continuities during this time frame. The big one is Islam. The second biggest one is trade, and also the spread of Islamic architecture. Changes and innovations, probably one that's most lasting change is the use of Arabic numerals. Those are the numerals we use today. But there's a lot of other things along that, especially in the area of mathematics and healthcare and things like that also that come in. Algebra, for those of you who took that or are taking advanced algebra with Mr. Melfi, that was developed by an Arab scholar named Al-Jabril, which I think I probably have said before. But there's a lot of change and innovations going on during this time period. Okay. So trade was seen as a path to wealth, but also as a path to spreading the faith, and that is why it becomes a major occupation for a lot of people, and it's an approved occupation. Slavery of non-believers is allowed by the Islam. The most famous example is the military version with the Janissaries, later of the Ottoman Empire, who we spent some time talking about in period 3 and 4. When we discussed the Ottomans, these were slave soldiers, generally not non-Christians. So slavery is allowed, but it is my understanding that you were not allowed to enslave a fellow Muslim. Women are treated as second-class citizens, often excluded, especially wealthier women. Differences show up in the lower classes where you couldn't afford to have women living in the harem, but women still ran in separate circles, and there were a lot of rules regulating their behavior. The big difference is in some of the trading enclaves, and it's usually a little bit more far out from the center of Islam around Arabia, where you have more adoption of local customs. In many cases in the trading conclave, the women took a leading role because the husband traveled for trade, so the woman ran the local operation. But it still remains very much a patriarchal society. As I said, there's a lot of rules on women. Okay. Moving over to Spain, also known as Al-Andalus. This is actually a separate caliphate from the other Islamic caliphates, and never really falls back under Arabic control. And so it becomes kind of this bastion of learning, and that was really the case all along. From the time Islam first moved into Spain, they brought with it the knowledge that the Muslims had kept alive, and the Byzantines had kept alive, that had gone to pot after the fall of the Western Empire in Rome, and Spain doesn't experience the dark ages that places of Western and Northern Europe did. It's a very vibrant culture. Religious tolerance is common in Muslim Spain, but it fluctuated over time based on the different rulers who came into power. Those who were in favor of it allowed it. Those who didn't cracked down and were very vicious to Christians and Jews especially. Okay. A little bit more on religious toleration. There's 3 main groups that are tolerated within Islam: the Jews, the Christians, and the Zoroastrians. Zoroastrians are pretty much only in the area that is modern day Iran, the Persian part of Dar al-Islam. Okay, these are considered to be people of the book. Their prophets are mentioned in the Quran. They're monotheistic. They're generally tolerated, though you did have to pay taxes usually to continue to practice your own religion, not convert, and you were treated as a second-class citizen. The Sufis kind of a form of toleration, but also were kind of intolerant in their own right. This is a brand of Islam that we talked about before. It's kind of an Islamic mysticism where you have these holy men traveling and preaching Islam, characterized by asceticism, which is kind of you deny yourself certain things. And if you can think of just that wandering holy man and the guru living on the mountain as kind of your metaphor, this is what we're really talking about. And they have this attachment to the remembrance of God, and it's a rebellion really against the worldliness of earlier periods. It's a strict observance of the Sharia law, but on the other side, they're very effective at facilitating conversion in India, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the video on India. Okay, so that's a wrap. That's what you need to know about Islam for this time period. Email me or message me or join the office hours or hang out if you have questions and need help.